Rome wasn't just about crushing people with chariots. They took it to a whole other level with fire. I mean, they loved their fires, especially when it came to executing people. And today we're going to talk about one of their favorite ways of getting rid of people who got on their bad side, burning them at the stake. Rome had different kinds of crucifixion for the messy kind of deaths, getting hacked to pieces if you wanted your execution to be quick, and then poison for the sneaky type. But burning people was something they really liked to do. Now, you might wonder why? Why would they burn people? What was the deal with that? Well, there were a few reasons. One was to scare the living daylight out of people. You see, Rome wasn't just about spreading democracy around the Mediterranean like wildfire. They also wanted to spread fear like wildfire. So if you did something really bad like rebel against the emperor or start a fire that was supposed to happen, or maybe you were an enemy of the state, well, you might end up on the wrong end of a torch. Another reason was because fire was kind of like the ultimate cleanser for Rome. It could purify people from their sins. Both real and imagined. And guess what? This idea stuck around for a while. For centuries, people thought that fire could actually kill dangerous ideas and make everything all right again. So how did this execution thing work? Well, first they'd pick someone to execute, usually a rebel or someone who went against the grain. The Roman emperors weren't big fans of hippies. Then they'd tie the person up nice and neat, not too tight so they wouldn't die right away, but tight enough to make things interesting. Now, where did they do this, you ask? In the most crowded places they could find, like the Roman Forum, right in the middle of the city, or near the Colosseum, because they wanted everyone to see what was going on. It was a bit of a spectacle, kind of like their version of Netflix. And before they lit the fire, they'd have some fun. Soldiers would beat the person up a little, maybe throw some insults, make sure they suffered a bit before the main event. And while all this was happening, a crowd would gather, watching intently, waiting for the show to begin. The condemned person would probably scream a bit, plead for mercy, maybe even try to break free, but there was no escape from what was coming. And then it happened. Someone, usually a soldier, would light the pile of dry wood around the stake, and the fire would slowly start to spread. At first it would be small, like little pops and crackles, but then it would grow bigger and fiercer, turning into a roaring inferno. The fire would climb up the stake, inching closer and closer to the condemned person, licking at their clothes, burning their skin. The smell of burning flesh and wood would fill the air, mingling with the screams of the dying person. Now, the fire didn't always do the job right away. Sometimes it would take a while to kill the person. And during this time, the soldiers would just stand there, watching, making sure that the person stayed alive as long as possible. It was like a game for them. And the more intense the person's reactions were, the more excited they got. There are stories of people who tried to save themselves, like jumping out of the flames or rolling on the ground to put out the fire. But most of the time, those attempts just made things worse. The fire had a hold on them, and there was no escaping it. Some people say that the burning sensation must have been unbearable, like being on fire from the inside out, and others say that the mental torment was just as bad, the fear and the sadness, the regret and the anger. Maybe it was both, who knows? But there was one good thing about being burned at the stake. If you were lucky, you died quickly. The fire took your life in a flash, and you didn't have to suffer too much. But for some people, the fire didn't do the job right away. It dragged on for hours, sometimes days, and these people became human torches. They walked around on fire, completely engulfed in flames, their bodies turned into burning torches. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds absolutely terrifying. Imagine being on fire and having to walk around. It would be like a nightmare, a never-ending nightmare. But this wasn't just about the person being burned. It was also about the people watching. For them, seeing someone burn alive was entertainment, a way to pass the time and maybe even learn a lesson or two. It was like their version of a horror movie. I mean, think about it. Why do you think they watched? Because they wanted to see the person suffer, but also because they wanted to see how the body reacted to the fire. How long it took to die, what it looked like when it was burning. Maybe they were trying to figure out if they'd be brave enough to jump into a fire and save the person. Or maybe they were just curious. Whatever the reason, they were fascinated by the whole thing. Now, you might think that it's weird to watch someone get burned alive for fun, but back then it was normal. It was part of their culture, their entertainment. They didn't have Netflix or video games, so they had to make their own fun. And let's face it, watching someone burn alive is pretty messed up. But people have always been into messed up stuff. They love stories about death and destruction, and this was like the ultimate story. It was real, it was violent, and it had a clear message. Don't mess with Rome or else you'll end up like this guy. The Romans weren't the only ones who liked to burn people though. This was a common form of execution throughout history, like in ancient Greece and Japan, and even in modern times. People have burned people for all sorts of reasons. For religious beliefs, for political views, just for fun. It's a sad part of human history, but it's true. But you know what? There's a good side to every story. And in this case, the good side is that it ended eventually. The fire would run out of fuel and the burning person would finally die, collapsing in a heap of ashes. And when that happened, the crowd would disperse. going back to their normal lives, leaving the burned body behind. Sometimes the ashes were collected and given to the family, but most of the time they were just left where they fell, a grim reminder of what had happened there. Over time, the spot where the person was burned became a place of remembrance, a memorial to the victim. People would visit it, maybe leave flowers or pray for the dead person, hoping that their soul had found peace. It's hard to imagine now, but back then, burning people was just a normal thing. It was like a routine, a ritual. People knew what was going to happen, and they accepted it. They saw it as a necessary evil, something that had to be done to maintain order and control. But today, we see it for what it really is, a brutal, inhumane form of punishment that has no place in our society. I mean, come on, burning someone alive, that's just messed up. But hey, at least it's over now, right? No more burning people at the stake. Well, except for those crazy survivalists who like to pretend they're in the wilderness, but they're actually in their backyard. Those people are still burning stuff. Alright folks, that's it for today's story. Thanks for joining me on this journey through time. And remember, keep an eye out for those burning stakes. You never know when they might pop up. If you enjoyed this video and want more historical tales, hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support us and keep these stories coming. Until next time, stay safe and keep learning.